And we are live for episode, is this 15?
I think so.
How do I never remember during the intro? Well, we are here for episode 15, and this time we have a very, very special guest. One of my best friends in the space. She wouldn't say that yet, but we're working on it. But one of my upcoming best friends in the space, Michelle Yates. Michelle is the owner and founder of Yates Nutrition. She is a registered dietitian and a specialist in binge and emotional eating. She also has a master's degree in health psychology, which plays a massive part in her work. She has a program called Nourished and Free, which has helped hundreds of women, soon to be thousands.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Has
We're
helped
working
hundreds
on
of
it.
women break up with their toxic relationship with food. Michelle, how are you today?
I'm so good because I have been so excited. I don't know why. I've been wanting to just hang out with you guys like over Zoom. And so when you asked me to come on your podcast, I was like, yes, easy yes. I don't even care if we talk about anything about work.
Well, we're not going to be talking about work. We're going to be talking about Mario Kart all day because finding out
I'm
that
so close to unlocking the mirror races.
yeah,
I'm
don't
so
you need
close.
to beat it all on like 200cc or something like that?
You have to get everything in first place, and then the mirrors unlock. The mirror, whatever.
And what happened that it wiped your data? Because you had all this unlocked, but then it wiped your data. What happened?
Yes, I did. I'm very serious about my Mario Kart. We just had to get a new Wii because Wiis are old and
Wait, you got a Wii, not a Switch?
Mm-hmm.
Any reason? Like the Wii, like the white box from like 2008?
Yeah.
Not a Nintendo Switch, like the new one? Okay, I'm gonna send you a link after this. That is absolutely shocking to me. But I'm like literally baffled that you got a Wii. I'm surprised. I'm impressed because I hadn't heard of people still playing the Wii. I got the Wii. Fun fact. My mom, I think it was 2000. I really do think it was like 2008 or 2009 when the Wii came out. Something like that. And I'm not gonna lie, it was Christmas. I'm opening gifts, and I was a little bit disappointed. I'm just a kid. Like,
We've
give
all
me a
had
break.
Christmases like that.
Yeah, I was just a kid, and there was one more gift under the tree, like far hidden underneath. And I open it up. It's just a small thing, about the size of a small book or a DVD case or a game case. And I rip off the corner, and I happen to rip off 1 in 4 chance, ripped off the right corner that said Wii at the top, denoting what game system it was for. And I lost my fucking mind. I was like screaming. I don't know if anybody's seen that kid who opens up the N64 and he's just like, he holds this, he's like, Nintendo 64, and he's screaming. It's from like the early 1990s or something like that. And that was me. I was so excited. But then my mom says, I'm so sorry. They were sold out. But as soon as they come back in stock, we'll get you one. Oh, talk about the highs and the lows, the victory and the defeat. And yeah, just crushed immediately. So we were checking for like, I think it was like 2-3 weeks later. I'm checking stock every day at every store, calling every store. And eventually, like 2-3 weeks later, it's Sunday morning. We wake up to go to church. My family was a big church family. And we wake up to go to church at 8 a.m. I'm not kidding. 8 a.m. That's what time church was. Maybe 8:30, but it was early. And there was a 10:30 mass, and I feel like
I was gonna say that sounds like a Catholic church.
It's a Catholic church, yeah. And so I wake up at like 7:30 or something like that, and I'm like on bestbuy.com checking it, and sure enough, it says they're in stock. I call to be sure. You're in stock. They're like, yep, we're in stock. You're gonna have to be here right at open. They open. Guess what time? 8 a.m. I'm begging because I know skipping church it's not an option, but I'm begging, Can we please go to 10:30 mass so that we can get this Nintendo Wii before? And my mom was like, not happening. And it's like, please, no, not happening. So I am sweating bullets in church. I'm praying harder than I've ever prayed in my life. I am on my hands and knees saying, God, if you are real,
if anybody's up there,
please. I'm taking the Eucharist, whatever it is, the Eucharist, and just like munching on it, really letting, please. I'm singing every song. So we get out of church, we run over to Best Buy at a measly like 35 miles per hour, and I'm begging my dad to hammer it. So we get there, run into Best Buy, just my mom and me, and my dad stays out in the car. We run inside, and we're like looking in the Nintendo, we're looking in the video game section, looking around. It's not there. Finally, there's this guy who's just walking around, and I say, "Where's the Nintendo Wii's at?" Feral look in my eyes, and he says, "We don't have them out because we're worried about theft. You need a ticket." I say, "Where's the ticket?" And so we grab, he's like, "You got to find Jeff." So I'm, Jeff. I'm literally screaming Jeff. Like, I don't remember if it was Jeff, Josh, Michael, whatever. So, okay, I find Jeff, Michael, John, whatever his name is. And he's like, "Oh yeah, here's a ticket. It's the second to last one. And there are other people looking for Jeff, Michael, or John."
There's a God.
There's a God. There is a God, for real. There's a guy behind me. He gets the last ticket. So I was the second last ticket. And then there's like another person behind me. They don't get a ticket. So I'm just like holding on to this ticket, fist pumping, going crazy. They had to double package it because they were worried about thefts in the parking lot. I'm like hugging this thing as tight as I can. There could have been a guy with a gun, and I would have died trying to protect that thing. Like, I was so I all this to say, I understand you getting a Wii. It's just, I do feel like you're 15 years late. But I get it.
Okay, to be clear, I beat the game on a Wii. It's like, it was my Wii for a long time, and it just kind of came with me as I got married and everything. And then it petered out for whatever reason, and we just wanted to, I don't know, Switches. This is a new technology. This is where I start to feel old, because I'm like, that's new tech. I don't want to mess with it. So we just went to the secondhand shop in town and got another Wii because it's familiar.
Man,
I'll be honest, it's not very optimized on our TV though, but
I'm going to blow your mind when I show you a Nintendo Switch and like how easy it is. Like, we could play online together. Like, the four of us could play Mario Kart against each other.
You can do that on Wii too. I just don't know if anybody
servers? I don't know if they still have internet, like online servers.
I'm sure they do.
Maybe they do. I guess
it's an option on the game. Is anybody actually logged on? Probably not.
It's just you.
And I have to connect. It's just me, and I have to connect the Wi-Fi, and I haven't tried, and I probably won't work. So,
okay, well, that was a fun little throwback. A nice way to start the podcast.
Also, what a thrilling tale that was! Yeah. I'm on the edge of my seat listening to that.
Yeah, it was such an interesting Christmas, because it really was such a low, such a high, and then just came crashing back down to earth once again. I didn't expect to start the podcast. Usually when we have a guest, it's like, let them talk. And I just spent the first 7 minutes of this just giving like a diatribe about about me getting a Wii. Okay.
I love it.
We're going to go back to you now. Thanks for listening to all that. Before we dive into the emotional eating and binge and stuff like that, the stuff where you are an expert in, how did you get started, and what's generally your background?
Yeah. So generally my background is a restrictive type relationship with food and body dysmorphia. I grew up in I'm a young millennial. Like, I'm at the last part, or like last years of the millennial cutoff. And so that means that I was watching Nickelodeon a lot, watching Disney a lot. And so those are like, you see little string beans on those shows, and admire them, and you want to be like them, and they're cool. And then just the environment in general, like, think about the conversations that we were having as kids around the topic of body weight, body size, fat people, looking good. Like, it's all about skinny equals better. And with my family as well, I love my family. I have a fantastic family. I don't mean to be like not honoring them, but there were some messages in my family as well about like, oh, this person should just go like jump on a treadmill and stop eating cheeseburgers and stuff like that. So you just, as a kid, you internalize that, and you're like, oh, if I get to a certain size, I won't be respected or valued by my family, my peers, my society. And then add on top of that, I was a dancer. Mm-hmm. And we know that there's increased rates of eating disorders among dancers and body image issues. And so, yeah. And then my perfectionistic tendencies, I was just destined to have issues with
Perfect
my
storm.
relationship with food.
Yeah.
Totally. So yeah, it started out as just being like wanting to be as small as I could, I guess. And it's so interesting because for anybody who has body dysmorphia, you'll relate to this, but when I was a kid, I felt like I was so huge compared to all of my friends. I thought I was like the chubbiest thing. And I look back on pictures now and I looked like my friends. Like I was the same size as my friends. And it's so weird. Like with the mental loops that happen and gymnastics that happen when you're dealing with body image issues. So anyway, it was mostly in like junior high and high school when I started to be able to think for myself a little more that I started to restrict. And, you know, I'm like 5 feet 1 inch on a good day. So I had to, I like looked up the ideal body weight for that,
Oh,
which is like the
terrible
low
idea.
range is like 95 pounds.
Right,
you know?
right.
And that's not to say there aren't people my height that are naturally at that and they're fine,
Sure.
but I'm not. Like
Right.
naturally, I'm on the higher end of that ideal range. And because of my personality, you know, I want to
get
be
right in
the
the middle.
best. And I want to
Yeah.
I
Or
want
on
to get
the
to the
low-
lowest
oh, the
point.
low
Because
end,
to
yeah.
me, in this culture of like skinny and smaller is better, it's like, okay, the low one is what I should be shooting for. And it's still
Yeah.
healthy. So, excuse me. And of course, never. Well, maybe at one point I did get down to that, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is that I ended up using my fitness pal like it was my job, which is funny
yeah.
because now I could say it isn't a job, but I don't make it part of my job. And you know, just trying to get, you know, the 1,200 calories thing is maybe actually reasonable for somebody my size, but not when I was as active as I was. I
Right.
was a dancer. I added exercising at the gym on top of that. As soon as I could drive, I was going like every day. So there was even a little season where I was like 2 days. I'm so badass.
Oh, yeah.
Like cardio in the morning, lifting in the afternoon, like dance at night. It's just ridiculous amounts of exercise. And my little peewee brain didn't comprehend that I'm still burning a ton of energy regardless of how active I am. So I just, you know, you're an idiot when you're in high school and think you know
yeah.
everything. And so I was just totally under eating, over exercising. And because I never got lower than that, like, you know, ideal thing, I didn't think there was a problem.
Right.
And other people didn't think there was a problem either. Because of my small frame, it's really hard to notice like weight loss, you know. And anyway, so it was in in college, I was already obsessed with nutrition. So I was like, let's make this a job. I think about it all the time. And I want to know what the perfect diet is. And which we all know is not a real thing.
Yep.
And I was in a college course on eating disorders. And I was like, oh, it's weird. Sounds like me. I don't like that. But I'm fine. You know, justified. So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of me seeing for the first time like my own issues. And in college as well, the restrictive side was hard to keep up with. At some point, it's just so difficult to maintain that. And so I started to, like, I remember it was one of the first days after my parents dropped me off. I went to college out of state. So by this point, they were like long gone. And I was in my dorm room and there was a chocolate cake that from Costco that one of my roommates' moms had gotten for us, just as kind of like, you're at college, like, congrats. I don't know, whatever. It was nice. But we didn't really have like furniture yet because it was still, you know, fresh move-in. And everybody was gone. And I remember sitting down on the floor with that chocolate cake and like binging on it. I don't know how much I had, but it was the weirdest. That was my first time ever doing anything like that where I felt like I wasn't in control. And it was the weirdest, like, out of body thing where I know that I shouldn't be doing that. I know it's ridiculous, but I can't seem to stop.
Mhm.
And of course, it makes sense because that was a change in life circumstances. There's a lot of stress. Like it makes sense that I'm trying to cope somehow and I don't really know how. And anyway, so in college, early years of college, there was like overeating here and there, and then I would feel bad about it, so I would purge, and whether it was exercise or vomiting, like basically you name it when it comes to disordered eating symptoms, and I've done it, like I've dabbled in all of the things. And eventually, I feel like purely by the grace of God, and also because of my education, like learning how much your body actually can handle and
Mhm.
knowing the science behind nutrition, I was like, wow, I'm making a way bigger deal out of this than I should. And anyway, so it was just like a slow burn, like, okay, I'm being ridiculous. There's plenty of people that I really respect in the nutrition field, like my professors or my peers in the class, and they don't feel this way around food, so why do I? And
Yeah.
eventually it just kind of unraveled, and also like doing some deeper body image work of like, why do I feel like I need to be or look a certain way? And for me it was like a big respect thing. I wanted respect from people, and so just like letting go of that, like I don't need everybody's respect. It's
Mhm.
okay if people don't like me or respect me. Like stop torturing yourself for the sake of other people's opinions. Like that was really freeing. So anyway, that was a long, I
No,
don't
that
even
was
know if you
great. I
wanted
mean, that was
that,
exactly the
but
background we were looking for.
okay,
So,
cool.
what kind of, and I think it really helps set the scene of like, not only, I don't love the idea that in order to help somebody, you have to have that thing, but also that lived experience. Like, for example, like an oncologist, a cancer doctor, do they
Hmm.
need to have cancer to help somebody else with cancer? No, no. But like something like this, where it's so emotionally attached, I think
Yeah.
having that lived experience is so powerful, and it can really add that like personal anecdote to the evidence that I know that you are an expert in. So what did the segue look, if you're comfortable talking about it, what did the segue look like for you, going from like, having these classes, having that class on disordered eating, looking at your peers, seeing that they weren't having the same troubles that you were, and then trying to heal your relationship with your food and with, your personal perception of your own body?
Hmm. What was that segue like?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was no like magical thing that just like really clicked it all into place for me. It was really a slow burn of like, okay, I'm going to pick up this book and then I'm going to start to follow this person on social media and get a new point of view and start to see things differently. I never got treatment, which I don't recommend.
Hmm.
But I think a part of that is because the education that I had was the education not to the extent of eating disorder professionals because they have eating disorder specific training, but a part of the education I was getting is a part of the education that those professionals would have had too.
Right.
So it was like was I was already kind of seeing a specialist in a weird way because I was involved in learning all the nuances of nutrition and health sciences and everything. And I had a really great dietetics program that I've heard from some dietitians that their program was the opposite. It was not
Mm.
helpful for them in their
Interesting.
relationship with food. And I think it really comes down to the professors,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate to have a great environment, and yeah, it's, for me, I read intuitive eating, and as you guys know, I'm not like a big advocate for every single thing that it preaches, but for me at that point in my life, it was very healing to just get a different perspective on food and start to think about things I'd never thought about before and notice things and be curious about things that just the self-reflection piece is incredibly valuable. And I'd never really been good at that. So in college, I started to get better at that. And, you know, so yeah, I don't have any like, this was the thing. This was
Right.
the
This is the
segue,
one
but
thing that helped.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really a combination of things, but
Well,
kind
yeah.
of
Of
I think the key takeaway there is like education and environment too. Like
Yeah.
what and who do you surround yourself by? And then also what kind of information are you absorbing?
And education and then who you surround yourself by. I think those are two core principles of your program, Nourished and Free. Could you talk about what
Yeah.
sets Nourished and Free apart from other programs? And maybe give our listeners, for the people who are struggling with, because I think, we're going to title this something along the lines of like disordered eating, something like
Mhm.
that. And so it'll get some eyes on people who are struggling with that kind of thing. So who is your program right for, and what sets it apart for, from other programs out there?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking about that. So it's really designed for women who are struggling with a toxic relationship with food, which can look a lot of different ways. The most common client that I have is somebody who's struggling with binging or emotional overeating, but also to like somebody who has a past history or current history of chronic dieting, kind of yo-yoing back and forth. And if somebody could say to me, like, I have an all or nothing mentality with food and it's on my mind 95% of the day, and also my body is on my mind all the time, you're probably a good fit for that because what we're doing is working through, like, we're trying to tease out all of these beliefs and values that you have around food and nutrition and your body that are actually making things harder for you and that are leading you down a path that's not serving you. Do we want to be healthy? Obviously, yes. Food and nutrition matters. Being nourished and healthy matters, but you should be able to do that in a way that's like free from a toxic relationship with food or feeling like it's consuming you or that food controls you. And body image is such a big piece of that. That's like a part of what we do. I have a body image therapist on staff because
It's
I
awesome.
I feel like that interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach is so powerful when it comes to disordered eating and body image. And even though somebody might come to us and be like, "Hey, I know that my weight is higher than it should be, and I'm not feeling healthy because of it," or whatever, even though that might be true, what's also true is that if you beat yourself up about that and you tear yourself apart and you hate yourself for your body, you're not going to get anywhere when it comes to being healthier, you
Yeah.
know? And so that body image piece and learning self compassion is so critical. And I love having a therapist on staff because she's trained in ways that I'm not when it comes to like trauma and things that are just deeply rooted in our body image struggles. And so even though somebody might benefit from weight loss, I don't really want them to think about that when they're with us because a lot of times it's triggering them to feel like they have to over restrict or over exercise, which then triggers them to binge or overeat or have the all or nothing mentality. And so they kind of need this intermediate step of grace and self compassion and viewing their body in a different way where they're not putting so much value and worth on that. And I know you do a really good job of that too, Alex, when you're talking about using the scale and weight loss and all of that. I feel like you do a good job of reminding people like this is not your identity. This is not what your value is in. But the reality is that for somebody that is so used to thinking that way, we need to dig in more into why they feel that way
Yeah.
and fix some stuff, you know? And so that's a part of what sets it apart. And also just, you know, I get it. And I want to give people the most evidence-based methods. I'm constantly going back to the drawing board, like, what can I update? What can I improve? I'm in the middle of updating my modules right now. Like, I really want to give my clients the best experience.
So one of the things that that you said the other day, and I absolutely loved it. I always tell clients like try to see the scale as data, and I encourage people to weigh themselves every day. And we'll talk about your perspective on that because I saw your video the other day on this, and I absolutely
Mhm.
loved it. And I love the just different in perspectives that you and I have. We're relatively saying the same message, but it's just from two totally different perspectives.
Yeah.
But my take on it, not that I disagree with yours at all, is that like try to see the scale as data and then look at weekly averages and just try to average that out. But you were saying in this video is like there's this spot in your head that is the weight, and whether it is when you look at the number on the scale, you are expecting it to be higher or lower than it actually is. It's never spot on to where it actually is. And
Never.
so this spot in your head, that's a mental load. And while
Yeah.
you have the knowledge to logic your way out of understanding like this isn't representative of my self-worth, it is still a mental load that you don't need. And I think that was just like such an interesting perspective that I can really get behind for people who have, I've worked with clients that have they just don't, even if they try to see the scale as data and they try to keep it just objective and not subjective,
Yeah.
it's just difficult for them. And so like, okay, then we're not going to use it. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It is not the end all be all. Like, the scale doesn't tell you your body composition. The scale doesn't tell you how much money is in the bank or how much your friends love you or how, like your pets or, anything like that. It's literally just how much gravity you have, basically, that's it. So, and then the other thing that I want to touch on is like, and I don't really know like what I want to say here, but I really like that you take this approach of mental health first. And because you can't hate your body, or you can't hate yourself into a body that you love or a relationship with food that you love, that's just not the way. Like this restrict and then punish and then restrict but binge punish cycles, like it's not. So I really think that that's a really smart way to structure, especially what you are doing. I think anybody in nutrition or, coaching as a whole could really learn a lot from that. But I think for the listeners, I mean, if you're somebody who struggles with this, like Michelle has my highest recommendation. I'm always pointing people in the comments of my post when people ask about this. Like yesterday or 2 days ago, I had a post that did pretty well, and I tagged you multiple times. Like, go to Michelle Yates, go to Michelle Yates page, and I appreciate you chiming in. I appreciate you chiming in and being like, you gave this was knee deep in the comments. There are like hundreds of comments, and you gave like a 5-paragraph MLA 12-point times New Roman. But it was really great, and so I appreciate it. And speaking of social media and speaking of punishing ourselves, because that's what social media is. Putting ourselves out on social media is a crazy person's task. Social media is a large part of your work,
crazy person's
my work.
task.
It is, and it's such a large part of our marketing and how we get clients and how we share our message and our information and kind of prove ourselves. But how has social media shaped your career and the way you work with people?
Wow, what a question. I have a love-hate relationship with it because it's brought me so many incredible clients, and I love my clients.
And friends.
And I love getting friends. Just friends. We're not best friends, Alex.
Yeah. Knock down a peg.
No, it's well, and actually that is true. Like, I really love the connections I get to make with colleagues as well. I've met so many cool people and gotten to collaborate with them because of social media. But it's also so tricky because the very advice that I'm giving, like to not listen to people on social media, is like the same thing that I'm doing, because I'm trying to help cut through all the noise and the BS that is making people need to work with me in the first place. But so I have a love-hate relationship with it because there's so much misinformation, and it's also just personally, it can be quite a load on you to be criticized frequently, which I feel like I've been fortunate enough to not be bullied too much, but it's only a matter of time. It'll come. and just like the comparison traps that are very easy to get into, and just the time wasting. Like, it's so easy to like use it for your business and for marketing, but then while you're there, let me just scroll a little bit, and then you've missed valuable moments with your kids or whatever. So I have a very complicated relationship with it, but I'm very thankful that I get to provide what I do through social media, because I think it's needed, and like your page is needed to have evidence-based fitness information, like how to do this exercise. I love your exercise like form videos. Those are great. And all the things, like there's great accounts that make it worth it. but it's not without its downfalls. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I don't even know.
absolutely. No, and I
Okay.
100% agree. It's like it is a love-hate relationship with social media because it's great because like wow, I mean, I know you've gotten messages that are just like, "Hey, thank you so much for sharing not just this post, but your account. I love your account. I love the tips you share." And that's the
Yeah.
upside. And then the downside
Yeah.
is like there are legitimate trolls that like I believe are like they don't have a conscience. Like some of the shit that people say is so bewildering and so just out of pocket. The other day I had people telling me that I need to eat cheeseburgers. I need to because I'm too skinny. Like it's just like I wouldn't say I'm that skinny. I wouldn't say I'm that lean. Like I'm like lean-ish,
But
but
now you're questioning it, right? Now you're like, maybe I
oh my
should.
god,
Like,
yeah, no, literally.
yeah.
And so I deal with a, I mean, as most people do, especially in the fitness world, I deal with a pretty moderate to heavy degree of body dysmorphia, where it's like you look in the mirror. Maddie can tell me 1,000 times, "You look amazing. You look so good. Like you're jacked." You know, she'll tell me that basically every day, and I look in the mirror. It's like, okay, well, one, I'm lifting because I'm not freaking big enough, right? I need to get bigger. But then also, it's like, oh man, maybe I'm not lean enough. I need to do a cut. But if I do a cut, then that's taking away from time that I can bulk. And I need to be bigger because I need to, there's just like these pressures on social media. And then I think with the rampant use of
Yeah.
steroids,
Oh,
just
yeah.
from like the general population, especially of fitness influencers, it's distorted our image of, for both men and women, of what
Hmm.
like not just health, but what somebody who's very fit can actually look like. And if we look at, what is fitness? Fitness is the capability of accomplishing different tasks, especially related to sport. If we look at like Michael
Hmm.
Phelps, that dude's not shredded. I mean, he's got the feet of a dolphin. Dolphins don't have feet, but you know what I mean. Like, and like he's built to swim. Look at Tiger Woods. Nobody's looking at that dude and being like, "Whoa, bodybuilder." It's like we have
Hmm.
equated or like world record runners or whatever sport it is, sumo wrestlers. We're not looking at them and being like, "Oh wow, pinnacle of health, pinnacle of fitness."
Yeah.
But realistically, like there is not one body shape or type that is best for any given sport. It's all dependent
Yeah.
on, what the sport is, what their capabilities are. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't even know where I was going with that, but
No, it's a good point, and I don't envy you because you are, in some way, as much as you might not want it to be, your body is kind of a business
oh, it
card,
is
and
a
I
hundred
hate
percent.
that for you, by the
It
way. Like
is.
nobody should have to feel that way, but it
It
happens
is what it
because
is. Yeah.
it is what it is. And when you're talking about fitness and all of that and cutting and bulking and all, like you're helping people build muscle, they're naturally going to be like, well, let me critique you. And that is just like, I I don't think I could handle it, like I am not in the fitness space because of that, partly, and because I just would rather do like what I do. But it's, yeah, I can imagine that's extremely difficult to navigate. And the keyboard warriors, yeah, some of them, there's no soul to be found. Like, where is
Seriously.
your soul? You have no conscience or sense of morality, and the fact that they're anonymous is just like
Oh, that's the worst when they don't have
so.
a profile picture and it's like their account is on
It's
private. It's
always
like
those ones. It is
show
always those
yourself.
ones.
Show yourself so I can
Show
judge you.
yourself. Exactly. Exactly. And I've found that a lot of people will say like don't engage, and I think that's totally fine advice, and certainly if you're feeling really overwhelmed by it, there's no need to, and you're welcome to block people. But I found that actually, like, sometimes engaging in a way they don't expect you to can build
Disarm
more
them.
trust and
Oh,
disarm them.
yeah.
And it's kind of become my favorite thing lately,
Yeah.
is engaging with them as a human and being like, interesting perspective, tell me more about why you feel that way, and like, and
Yeah.
just asking questions, and eventually they'll kind of talk themselves into a hole, and other people are like, you're an idiot, and so I don't have to do much. But still, sometimes you can actually have really interesting conversations with people, and I don't want to be in an echo chamber all the time
Right.
of
Right.
my opinion being validated. I kind of feel like sometimes we need some trolls to keep us humble.
Yes. Yeah. Seriously. Yeah.
That's a good perspective for sure.
I like that. So
I have one quick tangent. This is a little off topic, but when we're talking about your background, you mentioned, your family and just like kind of the environment. I was born in 97, so I'm older, Gen Z, had a very similar sort of background. As a mom, how do you plan on talking about food with your kids, or like how are you trying to model that relationship since you had that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, my daughter is going to be 4 soon, and so she's starting to understand things more. And so to be honest, I'm not an expert in pediatric feeding. I do have accounts that I follow to help support me with that, because as much as I can like work on my own body image and relationship with food, that doesn't mean I know how to communicate well to like her age group and like her
Sure.
developmental stage. So it's really good to have experts to look to for that, which I can give you some names if you want to follow them. But
Yeah, of course.
yeah, but I think the biggest thing is that I want to, at some point, like right now, I'm working on this is what this food does for you. Like, of course, kids love to talk about poop. So, like, these dates have fiber, they help you poop. And she's like, poop. And I'm like, yeah. And so she's starting to learn what fiber means. And I'm trying to be careful about like not saying that something is healthy or unhealthy or good or bad. And then also with bodies, I just try not to talk about bodies at all, like body sizes, anything like that, because it's just, first of all, unnecessary. And second of all, I don't want her to subconsciously or internalize this knowledge that like mom and dad care about what bodies look like. And so they care what my body looks like, because I don't. And I don't want her to think that she should care about it. But with that being said, as much as we have all the good intentions in the world, I'm still going to mess up, and she's going to leave the house at some point. She's not in my home 24/7 for the rest of her life. So she's going to see stuff. She's going to hear stuff. My son too, he's just younger. And so I think what's important is as she continues to age, I just want to create a safe space to have conversations with her and him about like, this is what people think about this, and you don't need to take that on. And just because whoever, so-and-so, none of her aunts are somebody that are a problem, by the way. But let's just, for the sake of example, just because Aunt Julie says that the keto diet is best and she's always worried about her weight, that's just something that Aunt Julie's going through. And you don't need to worry about stuff like that or whatever, like just having conversations, I think, is what I aspire to do, and create a safe space for her to bring those issues to me when they do come up. She's going to feel self-conscious about her body. She's going to feel self-conscious about her diet and feel like she needs to change things at some point, especially when she's a teenager. So I just want to be there for her.
Moving into a segue of, we're kind of have the next segment of binge eating and disordered eating, which, I'm sure when you're invited to podcast, that's probably what you're talking about most, and not Nintendo Wii's, but, had to throw you a curveball there. But could you clarify the difference between occasional binge eating and then episodes indicative of binge eating disorder?
For sure. So binge eating, there's like binge eating as a symptom, and then there's binge eating disorder, which is that symptom happening a certain amount of times, like you've qualified for the binge eating disorder. So binge eating as a symptom is characterized as a large amount of food that is definitely larger than anybody else would consume in that same circumstance. So I always give the example of Thanksgiving. That same circumstance, everybody's doing that,
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's like a random Tuesday in March, that's not really the vibe that day for the nation. So that's a you thing, right? And so if that's happening, like if you're consuming a large amount of food, that's definitely more than somebody else would in that same circumstance in a short amount of time, usually about 2 hours or less is the typical like range, and you feel a loss of control, then we're looking at a binge. So a lot of times people will be like, I struggle with binging, I binged, and they really didn't, because they just got like a second helping at dinner,
Right.
right? Like that's super normal. But for them, it's a binge because they have really unrealistic expectations of how much food they should be eating every day. Yeah, whatever. Like they're not used to getting a second helping. Another thing too is a lot of times they think they've binged, but there was no sense of losing control, right? It was just like I was at a Super Bowl party and I was just enjoying the food. Like, okay, yeah, you were just enjoying the food. Like, you didn't necessarily binge. You didn't feel like you couldn't stop. And so that's the biggest, I think, difference there that people need to look out for is, do you feel like you could stop at any point if you want to? Or is it very difficult for you to get out? A lot of people will say, like, it's like my body isn't catching up with my brain. I know that I shouldn't be doing that, but I still do it. And you can plan your binges too. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a spur of the moment whirlwind. It could be, I feel
I'm going hard
like
Friday night.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't stop myself from planning that. Like, it's inevitable and I have no ability to be flexible about that. So yeah, to be honest, it's not the best definition, because like what I would normally eat is great. What I would normally eat is very different than what Michael Phelps would eat.
Right.
Mr. Like 6,500 calories a day or whatever.
Right.
So it's gray and it's tricky. So I think the takeaway message there that I want people to hear is that if you feel like distressed about how much you've eaten or you feel guilty about how much you've eaten, it doesn't matter if it meets criteria or not. Just talk to somebody about it. It's distressing you. It's a problem to you. So it's okay to talk to somebody about it and get some help on that because you don't need to be feeling that way or feeling guilty about food, And then binge eating disorder is essentially like, okay, this is happening. I think the minimum for like the lowest severity and when you finally hit like, okay, diagnosis land is like once a week for, is it a month or 3 months? I should fact check that, but it's something like that. And then there's different levels of severity. Like, okay, it's actually happening once a day or twice a day, or it's been happening for 6 months, not just 1 month or whatever. So
that's less frequently than I would have thought. Just once a week. I mean, I hate to I don't want to like downplay it or anything, but I honestly would have thought that it would be a daily or every other day kind of situation. But as low as just I hate to say as low as ideally somebody doesn't have to handle this mental load at all, but that is surprising. One of the things that you mentioned, okay, Thanksgiving, that is a scenario where a lot of people are overeating. And so that's kind of like normal. And that wouldn't be probably categorized as binge eating. You moved into college. You were alone for the first time in your life. This massive change, this massive, massive stressor. How could you what is the differentiation there between like somebody rationalizing it as like, yes, I'm eating this chocolate cake, but it is a massive, it's just a stress. I'm in a extremely stressed period. And maybe a lot of people would react this way versus like, okay, no, this is probably a binge. I know it's gray, but is there a differentiation that people could kind of work through there to help rationalize like, okay, a lot of people going through this kind of event or this kind of stressor, is it just that using food as a coping mechanism is a clear indicator? Or
I would say it's more about that loss of control and like the volume, because you could be coping, like there's emotional eating where you're coping with feelings through food or trying to avoid feelings through food. But it could be just like that you had a candy bar,
Right.
And that was like technically emotional eating. But if it's a large volume of food in a short amount of time and there's like a loss of control, then it's like, okay, that's a binge. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And so the difference between emotional eating and binge eating, like, yes, there is an emotional component to it either way, but it's about the loss of control and the volume. Those are the two main things that differentiate. Do you cringe at all when people say that they like were binging and it's like not necessarily binging, or is that just something that it's like, whatever?
No, because that's their perception of it, and there's something there. If they felt like that, then regardless of the label, it's still something that we want to dig into. So
sure.
And most people aren't being taught the definitions of this, you know.
Right.
It's whatever. I don't care.
So for people who might suspect that they could have disordered eating of any kind, what are the signs that professional guidance like yours or a therapist or, with the nourishment-free approach, a 1-2 combo, would be beneficial? And on the other hand, are there instances where somebody might be able to implement healthy practices on their own to improve their relationship with food?
Totally. I mean, you might be fine working through things on your own. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying that out necessarily. Obviously, if you're in a tough situation with your health and there's some severe health related issues, whether it's undernourishment or overnourishment, then it's always better to just get help right away. But yeah, I think if you are more on the disordered eating spectrum, not necessarily eating disorder, you can start to dig in more into these things and question, like, what is stressful to me? And do I feel stressed out if I eat a certain food or if I look a certain way on any given day? And just be curious about that. Why? Why does that stress me out?
Explain to me the difference between eating disorder and disordered eating. I'm assuming
Yeah.
eating disorder has a little bit of a stronger connotation or label to it. It's a little bit maybe more official. Am I right on that? Eating disorder versus disordered eating?
It's basically like there's all these different diagnoses of eating disorders, like anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, like all these different, and orthorexia is a up and coming one as well. Not official yet, but disordered eating is more like, hey, we don't meet official criteria to get a diagnosis, but we're still not at normal, like we don't have a normal relationship with food. So you can think of it as a spectrum, like if you got two anchors on either side, where one is normal eating or like a healthy relationship with food where it's not a point of stress or whatever, and then the other side is like a diagnosable eating disorder that you can go to a professional and they'll give you a diagnosis, which you don't need, by the way. You don't need a diagnosis to get treatment or help or whatever it is. But then there's like this line in the middle that connects the two, that's disordered eating, and that can increase and increase and increase in severity until you get to the point that it's a diagnosis. So
it's a full-blown eating disorder. Okay.
Yeah. So some people never get to that point where it's an eating disorder, but they still struggle in ways, and it's interfering with their mental health and physical health. And so, yeah.
So there isn't really like a black and white line of like, this is where you should get help, this is where you should not get help. It's kind of up to the individual on like, could I benefit, asking themselves the questions of like, could I benefit getting help from this? And I mean, I would say more often than not, everybody should be going to therapy. I hate black and white rules, but I almost feel like it should be government mandated that like we should have 4 therapy sessions every like 10 years, like just 4 every 10 years, just like a little bit of just a phone call, like how we doing, everything okay? I think that'd be really, really good. And like, if you don't do that, you can't vote, or like something else. I don't know. Just something along those lines. Now, for those who overcame disordered eating or an eating disorder, we'll kind of be open with this. What does a healthy approach to body image and goals look like in recovery? Can they eventually set goals for body composition in a balanced way, like, calorie tracking or wanting to look a certain way?
I think so. And people may bristle up at that depending on their perception of things. But I think you can get to a point in your recovery where things are just data to you. Like you were speaking about earlier, the number on the scale is just data for you. For me, like that's a slippery slope when I get on the scale frequently. And I know that about myself. But and I don't know, I think maybe even body composition too. Like in this season of my life, it just doesn't even matter because I have young kids and I don't have time for that crap. So it's not on my radar. But I do think that it's possible to get to a place where these things don't have a lot of emotion attached or any at all. And it's more just like, this is data. This is even enjoyable for me. I think that some people can enjoy the challenge of fitness and increasing muscle mass just for the sake of longevity and just wanting to feel good and be able to do more things. And yeah, like all the health related implications of that. Of course, that person, if they've overcome disordered eating on any spectrum, is going to be more susceptible to those old thought patterns and behaviors. And so it's something to like check in on frequently. Like, how am I doing? Is this becoming obsessive? Am I able to like walk away from this and be fine? Or is it going to make me feel like a failure? And just be mindful of how you're doing. But I think it's totally possible to create a healthy relationship with exercise and body composition and healthy eating and everything without it becoming a part of your identity. But you do have to do that work to get there because it's deep.
Yeah. What is the average? I don't know if this is like a ridiculous question, but like, what's the average length of time that, at least in your work with Nourished and Free, that it takes for somebody to kind of get to that point of like feeling really good? Would it be possible for you to give like an average amount of time?
What would feeling really good look like?
I know it's such a vague,
No.
like I've seen so many of your testimonials. Man, I'm really glazing her right now, but like seen so many testimonials of like, you've helped me come to terms, just like get in a really good spot. And I don't have them like pulled out, like, verbatim or anything like that.
How
but
dare
I've seen,
you.
I know, right? I should have come with the receipts. I have
No,
seen so many testimonials from your clients that say like, you've helped me, along the lines of like, love my body again or heal my relationship with food. And so, is there like a rough, some people, it might take months, might take years potentially, but, I don't know. I don't even know if it's like healthy to say a rough timeline, because then people might like compare themselves to that. So I actually don't even know if I want you to answer this question.
I know
even
exactly
if
how
you
to
could.
answer this question though, and it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. So I think what's important is to adjust the expectation of what we're shooting for, and if we're shooting for never having a bad body image day or never having a single thought about
good luck.
how a food is good. Yeah, good luck. Seriously, like that's unachievable. That's not going to happen. And so to answer the question of timeline, zero, like never, forever, infinity, whatever, like it's never going to happen. And so what I always tell my clients is like, hey, we're taking 4 months to lay a foundation for your relationship with food and with your body so that it continues to get better and better and better and have this exponential increase over time. And what happens is like, I have clients that come in and literally day one, they're not binging anymore, which is madness. And I never expected that from this program, but it's a really cool side effect. That's not going to happen to everybody though. And that's okay. And then other people aren't necessarily binging. They're just feeling like food is on their mind 24/7. And so for them, like it's going to be more of a gradual decrease of reworking those thought patterns and replacing them with new ones. And I mean, yeah, like our brains, there's neuroplasticity. We can change thought patterns and behaviors and habits and everything, but it does take time. And so the point of working with me for 4 months is to lay a great foundation so that you know how to do that for the rest of your life. And those connections get stronger and stronger in your brain, and you know how to coach yourself. That's really what I try to do with my clients. And I know we've talked before about like continuing to have clients, and I struggle with that because when they graduate, they're like, they're good. And I'm like,
you're right.
Okay,
I want them to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't really know how to help you from here, but I think that's a good problem because I do want to teach them to coach themselves through things. That way they're able to continue to see improvements in their relationship with food, because there's going to be days where their body image is in the can and it sucks, and they need to know how to work through that. And I'm not going to tell somebody they're never going to have a bad body image day, or that they're never going to have a thought about binging or emotional overeating or dieting again, like crash dieting again. But what's important is we know how to work through that. So yeah, I mean, usually by 4 months, they've been doing really well for about a month or so. So I think it's like 1 to 3 months is when we see huge improvements. And then it just continues to get better and better from there. And the point of having like that, I only have them go through materials for 3 months, and then I give them a buffer month so that we can just like tie up all the loose ends, cross the T's, dot the I's, put a bow on it, and make sure they feel really good about doing it for the rest of their life. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Fluid answer, as always.
Yeah, really good. So we're going to move on to your favorite topic, which is intuitive eating. And so for our listeners, before we get into the myriad of questions that we have for you on this topic, could you explain what intuitive eating is?
Yes, intuitive eating is a self-care framework of eating. It is supposed to help people with feeling like they're caring for themselves in every aspect of your life, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. While with the eating experience, it's like giving yourself grace, not judging yourself. It's a rendition of mindful eating. It's really like that's the foundation is mindful eating, and then they added in their own elements. The two dietitians that created it, and they first published the book in the 90s, but it's just gotten a lot more popular in the last 10 years. They added in their own pieces about body acceptance and weight stigma and all of those things. So it's their own thing, but it is like largely based in mindful eating.
So on your website, you mention how helpful intuitive eating can be as a tool, but you don't agree with all the components of it. What are some of the components what are some of the drawbacks?
I think that some of the drawbacks are that it can feel very nebulous and unrealistic for people, because usually the takeaway message of intuitive eating, and if you really dig into everything and become a student of it, it's not actually the case, but the take-home message that is often brought home is that it's eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. And that's certainly an element of it. But the problem with that is that there's a lot of people who don't feel hunger. They don't know how to feel their fullness, or they don't feel it until they're physically sick. Or, there's more research coming up about like leptin levels in people not being, which is a fullness, right? Fullness signal.
Fullness hormone. Yep,
Yeah.
satiety hormone.
Yes, thank you. And some people like having lower levels of that. So that's a potential thing that could be a barrier to being able to be an quote unquote intuitive eater, is things like that, or genetics, or yeah. And so then there's this whole argument about like, what about people with obesity? Like, what are we just not gonna have conversations around body weight anymore? And with intuitive eating, they would say yes. Like, no, we should not talk about body weight, because that's rooted in oppression, racism, privilege. I don't know, throw out whatever career ending word you want to, if anybody called you that. And it's rooted in that. And so, and they'll have their research and stuff that says like, this is why, is because of this study, and this is why diets don't work because of this study. But then you look into the studies and it's like, wow, this is really weak data.
Yeah.
And it's also just like, it's cherry picked in a lot of ways, because what they'll do, and this is like intuitive eating for anybody that doesn't know, is closely interwoven with the Health at Every Size movement, which is through the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health. They trademarked it, Health at Every Size. And that gets wrapped up into this umbrella term of like anti-diet. So with the anti-diet narratives, there's a dismissal of a lot of data because, we didn't control for weight stigma, or we didn't control for disordered eating, or whatever. And I was actually talking to Dr. Aids about this the other day. I was like, well, I actually posted on my story, like, hey, what do we think about that argument? Like, does none of the weight science matter because of weight stigma? And I talked to a few different people, and something that Dr. Aids said was that, well, that's why we have Mendelian randomized control trials, because it's looking at genetics, which controls for, naturally, weight stigma and food intake. Like, it controls for all of the environmental factors that are at play, because we're just looking at like genetics and the impacts of obesity on health. And so I just think it's like poor science to make some of the claims that they do. And it's tricky because the intuitive eating framework is reliant on some of those claims. So I think you just have to be a little bit careful about, what am I using this for? Am I using it for a phase in my story where I'm trying to create a healthier relationship with food and become more mindful and not judge myself? Or am I trying to use it to lose weight, or am I trying to use it to heal a chronic disease? Like, if you're trying to use it for that, that's not, in some cases it can help with those things, but that's not the purpose of it. So you're gonna run into issues if you're trying to follow it 100%.
Okay. Anyway, so we were talking about intuitive eating, and kind of we started like dabbling in the health at every size movement and how those are, connected.
Mm-hmm.
What is your perspective? And you kind of gave your thoughts on this, but I kind of want to hear, like, what is your perspective on that movement? What are they getting right and what are they getting wrong? Oh boy.
I'm not sighing about you. I'm sighing about the topic. It's just taken a route that a lot of people actually, a lot of people that used to be really heavy into health at every size and like research into it, they'll like say now it's unrecognizable. I don't recognize it anymore, because it's turned into something a lot more like toxic and judgy and critical. And I think it started out as a really good idea, and it started out, was it in the 70s maybe, as it's a social justice thing, right? Like, let's reform our healthcare system to care more for people instead of, just telling them to lose weight and sending them on their way, which I think is great. I think that is solid. But what has happened is it's been like co-opted by a lot of activists. And I want to, I think the issue with this is that it can come across like I'm saying that we shouldn't care for people who live in a larger body, but I don't mean that. It's just that what's happened is that it's been co-opted by a lot of like fat positive things and body positive things. And there's been a lot of like anger that's been brought into the environment of health at every size. And as a result, people are looking for ways to dismiss any research that would put them in a position where they need to change something about themselves. Again, like, I really want to be sensitive here because I know that I don't have the experience that people do who live in a larger body. They are treated very shitty, let's be honest. And it keeps them from going to the doctor a lot of times and taking care of themselves. And so weight stigma is absolutely harmful. And we need to talk about things like that. We need to have, but at the same time, I think we can also be compassionate in the way that we discuss, like, yeah, this is a risk for your health, but what else can we talk about that will help you improve your health other than just like lose weight by, that's not helpful. Right. So I think there needs to be a balance in our healthcare system. I think doctors are required to discuss weight and BMI, but the problem is that you get 7 minutes with them, in the US. Yeah. And then, like, you don't have time for a nuanced conversation. So the experience of that really sucks for the patient. And they don't get a lot of help on like okay, but what now? And so I just think like it started out as a really good concept. And I think the net effect of it has probably been good, but there's a tide changing that I think it's becoming now a net negative, because people are like, if you disagree or if you bring up data, shut down. Like, you're one of those
business ending. Yep.
Yes. Yep. One of those career ending names will be said. Like, yep. Oh, well, you're just a racist. You're just too privileged. You're just ableist. Like, and it's insane. Like, if you have to resort to name calling because you can't support what you're saying in any other way, isn't that a red flag? Right. Like, that seems like not a good thing. And it's very difficult to have conducive conversations with individuals. And I don't want to like say that everybody that agrees with the health at every size and weight inclusive stuff is hard to talk to. I don't mean that at all. It's just that the people that you typically see championing, whatever, like hailing the messaging. Yeah, nailed it. No, that was it. That was a good one. Like hailing these messages are usually very difficult to talk to and have a large influence. And so they end up just spreading misinformation at the end of the day about weight science and taking these tiny, it's pseudoscience, really.
Yeah.
That's what it's turning into. It's taking a tiny truth, or not even a tiny truth, but a truth, and blowing it up into something that's unrecognizable at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting that, you know, we are like the body positivity thing, that's great, you know, but we can't align that with being dismissive of the data that having obesity is problematic to your health. And so with that, for people who are curious about this and would like to, you know, read a little bit, I have 5 studies pulled up and I've summarized each one. So I'm going to go through those really quick. So the first one is metabolically healthy obesity. That's just the title of it. So we're going to summarize or acronym that to MHO. MHO, absence of metabolic issues in obese people, lowers disease risk versus unhealthy obese, but remains higher than healthy lean individuals. That was point 1. Point 2, title this one, metabolically healthy obese and incident cardiovascular disease events among 3.5 million men and women. This one studied for 3.5 million individuals over 5 years. MHO had a 49% higher risk of coronary heart disease and heart failure. The next one, are people with metabolically healthy obesity really healthy? A prospective cohort study of 381,363 UK biobank participants. This one found that 380,000 individuals over 5 years. MHO had developed higher rate of diabetes, fatal death, cardiovascular disease, heart failure, respiratory disease, and all-cause death. The next one, metabolically healthy obesity and risk of incident type 2 diabetes, a meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies. MHO had higher rates of diabetes. And the last one, the long-term prognosis of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality from metabolically healthy obesity, systematic review and meta-analysis. This one found that MHO had higher rates of cardiovascular events. So it's, you know, this isn't saying that like people with obesity who are struggling with their weight are worse by any stretch of the imagination outside of their health. Like that is unhealthy to have. And whether it is, I mean, even muscle, just having more weight on your body is, you know, and this isn't for the people that are like, have a little bit more muscle. Like technically I'm outside of the BMI range, healthy range. I am overweight. I'm 5'8", 165. And it's like, I've put on 40 pounds of muscle since my senior year of high school without growing any like height. And I'm leaner than I was in my senior year of high school. So it's like, I fall into the category of overweight, but this, you know, I'm not to the point of like, I would venture to say I don't unfortunately have studies to back like this, how many pounds of muscle is it until you're, you know, like unhealthy. But, you know, this is for the people that are like a lean 200. If you're a lean 200, woo, first off, you're a specimen, and that's just impressive. But, you know, for people, like I wouldn't worry about falling outside of this like healthy air quote BMI range, because BMI, it's great. It's good for population data, but it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily the best tool for individual thing. But a lot of doctors will see, I mean, first is I think it's important to note that doctors aren't highly trained in nutrition. I think they have to go through one class. To the best of my knowledge, they just one class, but
one measly class.
Yeah, and so it's like, you know, they're not going to have all the knowledge that maybe you might want or need your doctor to have about nutrition, but that's also not their specialty, and so that's okay. All right, that wraps up the health at every size stuff. Do you have time for a few more questions?
I do. Yes.
Awesome. All right, so what are some of the common factors, if you could, you know, kind of like boil this down, what are some of the common factors that contribute to the development of binge eating disorder?
That's a good question. I also did fact check myself as a quick little bunny trail about the degree of incidence before it. Yes. And it's once a week for 3 months. That's the first okay, now we have a disorder. And then there's varying severities from there. So just going to clear that up for anybody that would, I know somebody out there was like, I really want to know.
Yeah. Is it 1 or is it 3? Because I'm at 1.5 and I'm freaking out.
Yes. But also, please go see a professional because I'm
Right.
not allowed to
Yeah.
diagnose. Anyway, so yes, different factors that can contribute to binge eating disorder. There's a lot. I think the big one is our messaging around nutrition and diet and like good foods, bad foods, right, wrong, black and white. Mentality can really set people up for an all or nothing thinking. So what that sets you up for then is either you're all in having a quote unquote perfect diet, which doesn't exist, by the way. And then when you inevitably cannot meet the standards of a perfect diet, which doesn't exist, by the way, then you are like, well, whatever, just screw it. I already messed up. So I'm going to enjoy it today, be all out, and then I'll start again tomorrow. And that is a cycle that most of the women I work with have been stuck in for like decades. And it's you have to like zoom out and think about, is that cycle ever going to stop if I keep having that same mentality and I have that same belief? No, it's not. Like, we need to break the cycle by maybe not dieting or over restricting the day after a binge, because maybe that's what's setting you up for a binge in the first place. So the all or nothing thinking also, just like, which I just started to allude to, the over restriction that can happen is, so binging is usually the result of unmet needs, and that can be physical or mental. So physical is a big thing. I'm actually working on a resource right now for people to help you learn how to make sure that physical restriction is not a contributor to your binge eating, because probably 95% of the time it is. And people are like, oh, I had, eggs this morning and then a protein shake for lunch and some nuts for a snack. And for some reason, I am like losing control at night and I can't stop eating.
I'm really hungry.
And like, yeah, but what's crazy is like, we are so trained as a society to think that less food equals better.
Yes.
That they genuinely think that's a bad thing.
That's
if
enough.
They're hungry after that.
Right.
And hunger has become this like sign that your body's trying to sabotage you, or if you feel it, that means you're burning fat. So it's like there's so much misinformation, and we're setting people, especially women, no offense, Alex, up for failure to like not have a healthy relationship with food. Men are absolutely prone to this too, by the way. Like,
for sure. I just think at
women.
I just think at much lower rates, just in my personal anecdotal experience, it feels like women are preyed upon, especially like I go to the store, and every time we don't do self-checkout, which is, I'd say, most of the time at this point, because we have big grocery hauls at this point, but I look at the magazines. Yeah. And it's like they are just preying upon women. Lose 46 pounds in 1 month. Yep. Like, just, skinny equals sexy. Like, just these headlines are, and every time I get like mad about it. I mean, we're probably going to have daughters at some point. We want multiple kids. We're going to get through the first one and then we're going to reevaluate. Right. That's what we keep telling people. But like, ideally I have at least one daughter, and I am a little bit concerned, more than I would be for my sons, about this kind of messaging. So no, I don't take that personally at all. It's just, it feels like the reality. Yeah.
And it's like the objectification around women too. I think there's more priority put on women to look good than men. For men, you guys have the burden of like, as a society, in a really generalized statement, there's the burden of like making money and like being strong, there's that pressure as well. And so it's just like the two different, the very like sexist things that happen towards women. And I wouldn't call myself a feminist, but I still get pissed off about how much women are objectified, because it leads us to feel like we need to be hyper obsessed with our bodies and what we eat and restrict as much as possible. Yeah. And so then it just ends up setting you up to binge, which, because of this culture, then there's so much shame and guilt that comes with binging and overeating, because it's like, oh my gosh, that is literally the exact opposite of what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be eating really clean or cutting my calories or cutting carbs. And here I am binging every night or a few times a week or whatever. And so then it's so tricky, because that shame can then turn into yet another reason why we're binging, because we want to escape those feelings of shame and guilt. And food can become a coping mechanism of making you feel comforted. So it's a negative feedback loop, and it's very tricky to get out of if you don't have the right tools and you don't give yourself a heavy dose of self-compassion. So yeah, it's like the all or nothing thinking is a big thing, and then the over restriction, and then I mentioned unmet needs can also be emotional. We can be using, as I was just saying, food to cope with emotions or escape emotions, or if somebody has a history of sexual assault or trauma, that can be it's a very big correlation there between people developing binge eating disorder who have a history of that, because it helps them escape memories. It helps them feel more protected. If their body is bigger, they're less desirable to future attacks and stuff. So it's, yeah, I mean, there's like, sometimes women just need to feel safe, comfort, especially moms. They want to feel like they don't have, or they're taken care of. Somebody thought about them or cared for them, or have a stress release. And food can do that. Also, avoiding food can do that too. I want to mention that as well, because sometimes avoiding food and restricting food can make you feel like you're accomplishing things and you're comforted by that. So I want to bring that in as well, because I think I don't want to miss that. That can be a thing too.
So it's like kind of like having control over something,
Yep.
in a way. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, I know this is not a one size fits all approach, but for the listeners who are struggling with this kind of thing, how could they develop healthier coping mechanisms for emotional challenges and move away from using food as the primary tool?
Yeah. I mean, I think like, and I don't want to get outside of my scope, because therapists are really better at this than I am, but I think there's a good opportunity to just reflect on what you feel like you need, like what is food doing for you in that moment. So that's where I'm able to kind of help people connect dots, is like, hey, tell me about your day. Were you pretty stressed out? Were you feeling like maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you didn't feel very stimulated because you're just like watching Bluey and like playing on the floor or something? I don't know. And you wanted to feel stimulated, or you wanted to feel like you're accomplishing something besides just keeping little babies alive, which is a huge accomplishment. But we often forget that because we do it every single day. And yeah, so it's like super important to figure out, what is it that I'm using food for? What is this helping me feel? Or I guess like, what feeling am I trying to escape from or correct? And then you can start to strategize on how you want to feel that way. If you need to feel comfort, maybe you're gonna go chat with your husband and have a hug or something like that, or chat with a friend, or maybe you want to watch a show from your childhood that brings back memories and that makes you feel comforted. Or like spiritual, if you're more spiritual, like read your Bible or pray or do something that brings you more comfort. Or if you want to feel a stress relief, maybe you really need to go and like work out or go on a walk or do something that gets your mind off of whatever it was that is making you feel stressed. So it's just, yeah, you have to identify, what is it that we're using the food, what is the function of the food, and how can I change to a different thing for that same function. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How would you classify, or I guess you could draw the differentiation between, using a different mechanism versus like avoidance, for something like, you're going on a walk or going, like, these are definitely therapeutic things, like things that are like helping us, or playing Mario Kart, for example. These are things that make us feel good, but like on the Wii, I might add, again, it's like crazy because like the N64 that's retro, but the Wii isn't retro yet.
I want the N64 though. Like if I found one, I'd be so happy. Banjo and Kazooie. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
my
I would
brother
be
has
so happy.
my brother has ours, and it's like, shit. Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm pretty jealous that he has.
Yeah, you gotta
ours.
go steal that.
Yeah, I have an emulator set up so I can play like any N64 game that I want. I could just like, you should get an emulator. Like,
What is
I feel
that?
like
I've never heard that word in my life.
an emulator is like a thing that like, it basically allows you to play different games from any generation. I mean, I don't really know like the technical term for it. I guess emulates, but which isn't
That makes
helpful
sense. Yeah,
in
that tracks.
Oh yeah, now I get it. Now it connects. Yeah, not super helpful, but yeah, there's like a lot of emulators out there. Although I don't know if they're technically legal. So like if Nintendo is listening to this or whatever, then like I'm not recommending this in the slightest. And I would say like, yes, this is a possibility of a way you could do it, but I would never recommend anybody do that. Anyway, we'll get back on track.
Fun element to this discussion.
But like how would you help people create the differentiation between like, okay, this is something that's helping me because it's taking my mind away from it, or it's helping me like kind of disengage from this problematic environment, versus like, what is avoidance? Is there like is there a way to draw that differentiation?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Well, I think first you need to differentiate between, is it physical feeling, like actual hunger? Because if it's actual hunger, you need to respond to that. Right. Like just avoiding that, if you're prone to binging, is going to set you up for a binge because you're increasing that feeling that makes you want to binge in the first place. So that should not be avoided. We should do that. So that's where it's like, back to a point I made before, it's so important that you're eating consistent meals and balancing them well. And why I'm creating a resource around that, because it takes away the guesswork of, am I feeling this way because I'm physically hungry or because I have emotional ish going on? If you're just you're on top of it when it comes to nutrition and balancing your meals and eating regularly, then it can help minimize the confusion around, is this physical hunger or is it like a psychological thing? So if you've eliminated that and that's not the case, that's not what's happening, I think like avoiding food is not helpful if you're also going to avoid what you're using the food for. We don't want to avoid our emotions. We want to figure out what is it. Otherwise, they're going to like come back and bite us and blow up in our face if we try to avoid stuff. So you still need to recognize, what is it that is going on in me right now? Maybe food will be the only thing that makes you feel better, to be honest. Like, I don't care if people emotionally eat from time to time. I do. And sometimes that is the thing that's going to make me feel better. And if I give myself permission to do that, it's less likely to be an overeating episode, because I'm just like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it happening. But sometimes there's other things that can make you feel better, or food won't make you feel better, period. You just think it will, or it's not actually, it will in the moment, but it's not actually solving the underlying issues. So maybe you really do need to go for a walk. That's not avoiding things. It's giving you an opportunity to think more about whatever is upsetting you to the point that you felt like you needed to eat. Does that make sense?
So it's almost like a psychological perspective of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. So quick topic switch. And this is the last question we have for you before the outro. And it is, and I want to be very clear, we're talking about, well, I'll like spell it out in a moment, but social media trends like oatzempic, how do they add to the confusion of weight loss? And again, for the listeners here, I'm not saying Ozempic, which is a weight loss drug or weight loss aid drug. Oatzempic, OAT, like breakfast
oatmeal.
Oats.
Yeah,
like oatmeal. And if you're unfamiliar with this trend, it's people have just found out just recently that oatmeal has fiber and can keep you full for a long time. And so they are equating this in a kind of ridiculous way, in my opinion. They like have this special shake, and I don't remember what it's like made of.
I don't remember.
But they like
it's
blend
literally
oats,
like water and lime juice and salt and oatmeal, I think.
Yeah,
like,
and so
nasty.
I can't imagine that tastes very good.
No.
And so like Dude, if I went outside and ate dirt, you think I'd want to eat much either? No. I think I'm going to be pretty full pretty quick because it was disgusting. Shocker, we eat more of foods that taste really good and less of foods that don't taste that good. But anyways, so people have coined this trend, oatzempic. Like, this will help you lose weight. And like eating oatmeal, pointing to any one food in isolation and saying this will help you lose weight, this will help you get healthier, there are healthy, and one of the things that you said earlier is there's not like healthy food or unhealthy food. There are healthy dietary patterns, there's an unhealthy dietary patterns. There is not a perfect dietary pattern. There are elements of what we should be doing, appropriate calorie intake to support our energy needs, appropriate protein intake to support our physical needs and goals, fiber intake to support, well, probably a good rule of thumb is 14 grams per 1,000 calories. That's the American Heart Association recommendation. That's a pretty good, but like 25 grams, 30 grams for women, roughly 35 grams for men, roughly. That's a pretty good start. That's not a black and white rule. But anyway, so social media trends like oatzempic that almost claim to be like the fix-all, the cure-all, like this is what you need to do. How do they add to the confusion of weight loss?
So much. And I think it makes it so difficult for people to understand their bodies because it's taking them away from understanding their body. It's like misinformation, that's not the truth. That's not the whole truth. Yes, it will probably help you lose weight if you're replacing a whole meal with just like essentially water, a little bit of oats, and some lime juice. Yes, think about that. We're having less calories. And like Alex said, you're probably not going to have a great appetite after that because it's shot after having something so disgusting. Right. But on the flip side, you might end up feeling later in the day, like let's say that you had that for breakfast. Later in the day, you might be like, man, I have not had anything that tastes very good today. And I'm craving X because of that. And so then it can even lead to overeating because we're just not satisfied. It goes back to unmet needs. Sometimes that need could be just feeling satisfied with the food you're eating. And if you don't have that need met, then eventually it catches up and you want to feel satisfied. You want to feel like you've had some good food. So it's just like, it's steering people away from understanding their own bodies better. Like that's an issue of calories in, calories out, buddy. Like you're having less calories during the day. Or if it doesn't work for you, it might be because you haven't changed your calorie intake or you increased because you were so tired of having that shake in the morning and it ruined your whole day that you were looking for something good that night and ended up overeating. So I hate to oversimplify and say calories in, calories out because it's not that simple. There's a lot that goes into those
both
things.
Sides of that equation. Yes. Right. Yeah.
But it's if people think there's like a miracle food or trend or thing that will help them, they're gonna be disappointed when at some point it stops working. Like I looked at the comments on that post and it was like only positive comments, by the way. She clearly was deleting anybody that knew what they were talking about. And it was like, I've been doing this for 3 weeks and I'm down like 5 pounds. And I'm like, okay, check in with me in 6 months, sis.
Yep.
Like, and we'll see where you're at because this isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
It does. And it's these like quick, I don't know, they are so clickbaity. And I always, I what is it? Never attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance. And I don't know if it is ignorance or malice that some of these big accounts are sharing, like, do they know better? Or, some of them, like, I won't name drop, but I want to, but some of the big accounts with like even millions of followers that are sharing things like the carnivore diet, for example, or like you need to be keto, you need to be doing just different things that are legitimately harmful to people, legitimately will be reducing the lifespan of thousands, if not millions of people. I never know if it is, oh, they're just stupid and they don't know any better, or like, nope, this is kind of their agenda. They're going to keep rocking with it because it makes them money. I don't know. And it's honestly, it's a bummer either way, but I hope they're not like just straight up evil, but I don't know. Some of the people, it's just, it's shocking.
I think, I don't know, and maybe this is just how I cope with it because it makes me want to cry on the inside, but I think it is a lot of times ignorance. Like they genuinely feel like they're doing the right thing, and I also can, I think, have that perspective because there was a point in my life where I genuinely thought I was doing the best, healthiest thing, and it wasn't. And I just didn't have all the information. And so I think you have to, if you're trying to answer that question, think about like, does that person have all the information or not? And if they're not a PhD in nutrition, they probably don't have all the information. There's PhDs in like cardiovascular surgeons that are giving out nutrition advice. They know a decent amount about like a heart healthy diet, but not necessarily a lot else. And so they don't have all the information probably. Maybe they do, but, and then especially like the random coaches online or random momfluencer, like, yeah, they don't have all the information. I think that's ignorance for the most part. I think it's usually ignorance, which helps me cope
That
with
makes me
it.
feel better. Yeah. Okay, that was the last question. Now, I guess, nope, that's not totally true. We have 2 more questions. One, where can people find you on your social media platforms? Go ahead and give a shout out.
Well, you already share my page so much because you're so nice. But if you haven't seen it on Alex's profile yet, my Instagram, or actually really any social platform, is Yates Nutrition. That's my like username. So just type that in. You should find me anywhere that you like to waste your time. No judgment. But I waste my time too. And yeah. And then in terms of like working with me, you're welcome to just go to my website, yatesnutrition.com. I've got a ton of free resources, by the way, too. You don't have to work with me. I've got a podcast. It's called Nourished and Free, the podcast. And, you know, I try to do a lot of like myth busting on there and talk through things that ultimately make it harder for us to be nourished and free because we have these misaligned beliefs and thoughts about food, and we're worried about things that we really shouldn't be worried about. I also talk with like past clients on there if you ever want to just like kind of hear what it's like to be a client of mine, and also just feel maybe like you're not alone. I think that's why I love those episodes, because something that is so shameful, not that it should be, but we put that shame on ourselves, is being talked about openly, which helps us to have more conversations and more people can get help if they're talking about it. So anyway, you can find my show anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And if you're hearing this, then I know you do like podcasts. So come find me.
Perfect. You actually nailed the second question, which was how can people work with you? So there we go. In Nourished and Free, which you can find more information about on her website.
Yep.
Links to her Instagram and TikTok and website will be in the description as always. Are there any other social medias that you're on that I'm not aware of, like YouTube?
I'm on YouTube and LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on those.
Do you post on LinkedIn?
Sometimes I'll just post like my blog posts if I have a new article.
I'm impressed. That's very well put together. That's very impressive. Okay, so we will add the YouTube. Do you want me to add the LinkedIn? We're gonna add the LinkedIn. We're gonna
do not add the link. Nobody listening to this is gonna want to find me on LinkedIn.
You never know. You never know. So okay. The LinkedIn will be a game time decision when I'm editing the podcast, but we will have the website, the Instagram, the TikTok, and yeah, thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please screenshot it, share it on your story, your Instagram story, tag Michelle at Yates Nutrition, tag Matti and I, and then yeah, give it a 5-star review if you haven't already, although I know all of you have. Subscribe, although again, I know all of you have already, and that's it. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and thank you for being so generous with your time. We're at like an hour 40 here. I'll cut out like 10 minutes, so we'll be down to like an hour 30 at the end of this. But yeah, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This is a super fun way for me to spend my time. So
all right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.